Okay guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to install Arch Linux. Down the bottom you'll see a handy guide to see what part of the video you're in. I'll update the highlight as I go along. To get started with installing Arch Linux, you're going to need some requirements. The first thing you're going to need is a USB drive. You can do this from VirtualBox, and if you do that, you won't need the USB drive at all. But if you're using a physical computer for this tutorial, you will need the USB drive. Anyway, once you have those requirements out of the way, you're also going to need a tool called Biglina Etcher. So go ahead and just Google that, type Etcher in. Should be the first one, biglina.io. Download and install that. Then you're going to Google Arch Linux download. Click on the first link, downloads at archlinux.org. You're going to see this page, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and find the links that are under the US. These mirrors are just copies of the software that is stored on different servers. I would probably pick the mit.edu one or the mirror.kernel.org. They all have the same files. Once you pick one, go ahead and click on the Arch Linux ISO file and download that. I already have the file downloaded, so I'm just going to skip that. And at this point, if you're using a USB drive, you're going to go and open up Etcher, and you'll take that file and just drag it in there and flash it onto your USB drive. When that process is complete, just go ahead and unplug the drive, plug it into your host computer that you're installing on, and restart it. Boot from the USB drive. Now from this point forward, I'm going to use VirtualBox to continue with the video. This process is much the same from this point on if you're using a physical device. You just use your boot menu to boot the drive instead of doing it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and restart my virtual machine here with the USB drive plugged in. It's going to boot right into the drive. I'm going to just resize this. You want to pick this first option here. You can pick this one as well if you have enough RAM, and if you want to unplug the drive, but this option should be found. So just hit enter, and it should boot up. When that's finished, you'll be greeted with a bash shell. Alright, now that we booted into the installation media, we need to connect to the internet. Since I'm using VirtualBox, the internet is already set up for me. If you're not using VirtualBox and you boot it from a USB drive, the easiest thing to do would be to plug in an Ethernet cable. You can use Wi-Fi, but that requires you installing extra things, and I'm not going to explain it here. Alright, so now that you connected to the internet, you're going to have to partition your disk. To do that, we're going to use a gdisk tool. Do gdisk/dev/sda, which is a path to my disk drive. If you have an NVMe, it might be /dev NVMe0N1 or something similar. Now, when you first run gdisk, you're either going to not have a partition table at all, or you're going to have a partition table present. Since I don't have a partition table, I'm going to go ahead and create one, and then I'll show you what it looks like if you do have one already. So just type O and Y and P, and you'll have a new GPT partition table. Hit W and then Y to save these changes to the disk. Do gdisk again, and you'll see that there's a partition table present. If you hit P, you can list the partitions. You might need to delete all of these, or you can just do this. X for expert, R for recovery, and then we're going to do Let's see. We're going to do X again, and then we're going to Z, Y. This will wipe out the partition tables. The next time you run GS, you'll have a fresh partition table. Go ahead and do L, Y, and we'll go ahead and make our first partition now. Hit N, hit enter, enter, enter. And then for the last sector, we're going to do +1 GB byte. Type L, type FE, and we're going to use the EF00 partition type. That's our first partition. We're going to make one more. N, enter, enter. Use all of the space. Type root. And we're going to use 8304 for the partition type. Now that both partitions are in place, go ahead and make W and Y to save the changes. Now that the disk is partitioned, we have to add file systems to the partitions before we can store anything inside them. The first partition, we're going to use FAT32. And the second partition, we'll use ext4. For the first one, do make fs.fat-f32/dev/sda1. And then for the second one, do the same thing over ext4/dev/sda2. Great. Now we need to mount the file systems and install the base packages. Do mount/dev/sda2, which is going to be our root, onto /mount. If you do ls/mount, you can see that the file system has been mounted. Now we need to install a kernel, or install the base system onto the root file system. To do that, we're going to use the packstrap command. Do packstrap.h, you can see its options. We're going to run packstrap with cgin so that we don't adversely affect any configuration on the new root system. And we're going to install packages to /mount, and we want the base package. Hit enter. This is going to install a whole pile of stuff on there. Alright, I'm going to go get a coffee or something while this finishes and come back later. Okay, and once that's finished, we can move on to installing the kernel into the base, the new root file system. We're going to do arch chroot /mount. We're going to do packstrap /mount micro to install a text editor. Now, we're going to use the command arch chroot to change our root system into the new one. It'll be like we booted into it, but we didn't really boot into it. Now, we're going to have to update the pacman mirror list so we can download packages onto this file system instead of the other one. Do micro /etc pacman.d mirror list. And as before, get down to the US servers and uncomment one of them. We're going to use a kernel.org one here. Just get over there and remove the hashtag, save the file with Ctrl-S, and close it with Ctrl-Q. Now we can do pacman-key init and pacman-key populate arch limits. This is going to set up the package manager so we can actually install packages on the new root file system. After that's done, we're going to do pacman-syu to sync the packages and install Linux and Linux firmware. Again, use 1, hit enter, enter. Packages were downloaded and installed. Again, this is going to take a while. It's a pretty big download. Go have a coffee or something, unless your internet is fast. Okay, and now that you've installed your Linux camera, your Linux kernel, and your Linux firmware, as well as your init RAM disk system, you're almost ready to boot. These messages here at the bottom of the log after installing the kernel show you that a RAM disk has been created for the kernel to boot into. Now, before you can boot, you're going to have to install a bootloader though. For a bootloader, we're going to use grub since it's simple and easy to set up. So again, we need pacman-s this time, because we don't have to sync the package with us. And we're going to install grub. Hit enter, yes. This one's pretty small, it'll be done quick. Now that grub's installed, we actually had to install it to the file system we plan to boot from. So to do that, we would do grub install /dev isda. There's no FE directory. Let's try SDA1. Okay, the reason this is failing, we need to change into the boot directory, and we're going to go ahead and make an FE folder. Make the FE and mount /dev/sda1 onto FE. The FE partition is a bootloader partition. It contains the files the bootloader looks for when it's booting. Let's try that pacman or the grub install command again, and it should finish correctly. We're missing another package, so let's do pacman-s FE boot manager. FE boot manager is a package required by grub to do its job and tell your firmware to boot into the grub bootloader. And one more time, grub install /dev/sda. Okay, good. Now if you do ls/boot FE RH, we'll see the grub has been installed to the FE system partition. And if we do ls/boot grub, we'll see the grub has been installed into the boot partition as well. The FE binary will boot this folder to boot grub, which will then boot your Linux kernel, which will boot the init RAM disk, which will boot the real root file system. Okay, now for that to happen, we need to make a configuration for grub. Do grub-make config. First we need to do micro/etc default grub. And we're going to change our command line a little bit here. Edit it and add root equals /dev/sda2. This is a location of your root file system. It's telling the init RAM disk where to look for the root file system. Your kernel will not boot without this. Control S, Control Q. Now do grub make config -o /boot grub.cmp. You see in the output that it found both your kernel and the init RAM disk file. That's good. You're almost done. You can almost boot the system. Before you do though, set a password for the root, or you won't be able to do anything when it does boot. Do password root, or set it to whatever you like. Now do sync, exit your ch root, and now you can shut down the computer or the virtual machine. just go ahead and boot up from the hard drive you just partitioned instead of the USB. Boot manager, and we'll just go ahead and boot that hard drive up. This is a grub bootloader. Just go ahead and select the first option, hit enter. You'll see it loads Linux and the RAM disk. And now it's starting your root file system. Now you can log in, type root, and root, root. That's it, you've installed Arch Linux. This is a very basic install. It doesn't include any networking setup or a GUI or anything like that. To finish this install, you're going to have to go to Google and Google the Arch Wiki installation. And the first link should take you to the installation guide. You'll be able to follow this to complete your install and customize it to your liking.